In the small coastal town of Crag's End, unease had become as much a part of the atmosphere as the salty sea breeze. For weeks, reports of colossal, otherworldly creatures, Kaiju, had spread like wildfire, their massive shapes casting ominous shadows over the seas and skies. Yet, for all their terror, the Kaiju had kept their distance, lumbering along the horizon as if observing from afar. One misty morning, the townspeople awoke to an even graver sight. Not only were the Kaiju closer, but another threat had arrived. Strange, sleek ships hovered above the town, their dark forms blocking out the sun. It wasn't long before the rumors started. The ships were not of human origin. The first attack came quickly. Alien crafts, shaped like dark blades, swooped down and unleashed volleys of energy that crackled through the streets, disintegrating entire buildings in seconds. Panic ensued. Families grabbed what they could and ran for cover, but there was nowhere to hide. The alien technology was far beyond anything humanity had encountered, rendering their defense systems useless. The remaining townsfolk huddled together, bracing for the end. Then, something remarkable happened. From the fog-enshrouded hills, a Kaiju emerged. It was massive, its gray, craggy skin blending almost seamlessly with the rocky outcrops of the hills. The creature lumbered forward, its steps causing the ground to tremble beneath the townspeople's feet. Fear rippled through the crowd. They were caught between two forces they could not possibly hope to withstand. As the alien ships turned their weapons on the Kaiju, it let out a bellow that seemed to shake the very air. With surprising agility, the creature dodged the alien energy blasts, closing the distance between itself and the nearest ship. One swipe of its massive clawed hand sent the alien craft spiraling into the sea. To the astonishment of the townsfolk, the Kaiju seemed to be defending them. But why? The town's mayor, Ava Hall, watched in awe from her makeshift command center, a dingy, sand-covered basement that had been converted into a shelter. Her team scrambled to keep the communications equipment operational amidst the chaos. She couldn't believe what she was seeing on the grainy monitors. "Mayor Hall," a voice crackled over the radio, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Dr. Mark Foster, a local scientist who had been tracking the Kaiju sightings since they began. "I need you to see this. The Kaiju. It's reacting to the aliens in a way that's almost strategic." "What are you saying, Doctor?" "Foster?" Ava replied, her tone sharp, but there was a glimmer of hope in her voice. "Mayor, I think the Kaiju aren't here to destroy us. They're here to fight back against the aliens. They might actually be on our side." Eva glanced at the monitor again, watching as the Kaiju roared defiantly, its massive bulk charging towards the next alien ship. The aliens responded with a furious barrage, but the Kaiju absorbed the energy blasts with only minor hesitation, continuing its relentless assault. "Then we need to figure out how to communicate with them," she said, determination hardening her features. "We can't sit back and let them fight our battles for us. We need to work together." Dr. Foster hesitated before responding. "Easier said than done, Mayor. But I've been studying their patterns, their behaviors. I think it might be possible to establish some kind of connection. They're not just mindless beasts. There's intelligence behind those eyes." Eva turned to the ragtag team in the shelter. "Get me everything we have on communication. Military, scientific, whatever it takes. We need to reach these creatures before it's too late." Outside, the Kaiju had taken down 2 more alien crafts, but the remaining ships were regrouping, preparing for another onslaught. The crowd of townspeople watched in shock and awe, the idea forming in their minds that these creatures, these monsters from the depths, might just be their saviors. The ground shook once more as another Kaiju appeared on the horizon, smaller but equally fierce. Its scales gleamed in the pale light as it joined the battle, tackling an alien ship with swift, precise movements. The 2 Kaiju moved with an uncanny coordination, almost as if they shared a silent understanding. The townsfolk held their collective breath. Could they really depend on these beings for protection? And if so, how long would it last? Eva's voice rang out over the radio, snapping them out of their daze. "Citizens of Crag's End, This is Mayor Hall. I know you're frightened, but we're not out of options yet. We're working on a plan that just might let us talk to these giants. Stay strong and help each other. We're not giving up yet." As her words resonated through the town, hope flickered to life amidst the fear. They were far from victory, but in the heart of Crag's End, a spark had ignited. Humanity had found a sliver of hope in the most unlikely of allies, and they were determined to see where this newfound alliance could take them. In the makeshift shelter, Mayor Eva Hall and Dr. Mark Foster worked tirelessly, poring over research and digging through the town's limited resources for any means of communication. The scientists, engineers, and tech-savvy townsfolk who had gathered there felt the weight of desperation pressing down on them. They were racing against time. Alien ships continued to arrive, and the Kaiju, while formidable, couldn't fend off the invasion alone. Dr. Foster clutched a worn notebook filled with sketches and hastily scrawled notes. "Ava, we need to understand how they think," he said. "If the Kaiju are sentient, if they're capable of strategic thought, there has to be a way to reach them, even if it's rudimentary." Eva sighed, glancing at the battered radio equipment that had been pulled from the ruins of a nearby school. "This equipment wasn't meant for this," she replied. "But it's all we have." She turned to the group. "Listen up. We need ideas. How do we get a message across to a creature that may not even perceive the world like we do?" A young woman named Jade stepped forward, a laptop clutched to her chest. She was a linguist and a teacher who had once dabbled in cryptography. "What if we use light patterns?" she suggested. "If we can send rhythmic light pulses, we might be able to establish a simple form of communication. It's a basic language, but it could work." Dr. Foster nodded, his eyes lighting up with hope. "That could be a start. Kaiju's eyes are sensitive to light. They might pick up on it. We need to find a way to generate strong enough signals to get their attention." "Does anyone have a way to amplify light?" Eva asked, scanning the room. One of the engineers, Owen, lifted a hand. "I can rig up something," Owen said. "We salvaged a few pieces of tech from a downed alien ship earlier. It's risky, but I think I can use it to project a focused light beam." Ava's face brightened. "Good. Get to work on it." She turned to Jade and Dr. Foster. "While Owen rigs up the light, I need you two to work on patterns. Something simple, something universal." With their plan in place, the group set to work, each contributing their unique skills. Owen gathered the alien tech and combined it with their remaining equipment, slowly piecing together a rudimentary light beacon. Jade, meanwhile, sat with Dr. Foster, brainstorming patterns and experimenting with rhythms that could convey basic messages. After hours of tense work, the beacon was finally ready. The group hauled it to the edge of town, setting it up on a hilltop where it would be most visible. The townspeople gathered below, watching with bated breath as Owen made the final adjustments. "Ready?" Eva asked, her voice taut with anxiety. Owen nodded. "As ready as we'll ever be." He flipped a switch, and the beacon roared to life, casting a brilliant beam into the sky. Jade, standing beside him, began inputting the patterns they had created, her fingers moving swiftly over the controls. High above, the nearest Kaiju shifted its gaze, its massive eyes catching the light. It let out a deep, rumbling sound that echoed across the landscape, sending tremors through the ground. Jade held her breath, watching as the creature seemed to regard the light with curiosity. She pressed another sequence, hoping to convey a sense of peace, of friendship. The Kaiju responded with a slow, deliberate movement, its massive head tilting to one side as it watched the pulsing lights. The townspeople below gasped, clutching each other as they waited to see what would happen next. To their surprise, the Kaiju raised one colossal arm and pounded it into the earth in a steady rhythm, a response, albeit primitive, to their signal. "It's working!" Dr. Foster cried, his eyes wide with disbelief. "They're responding! They're actually responding!" Eva watched, her heart pounding with excitement. "Keep going, Jade. See if you can build on that. We need to establish some kind of basic understanding." Jade nodded, adjusting the patterns and sending out new sequences. The Kaiju continued to respond, its movements slow and deliberate, as if it were piecing together the strange message being sent. A second kaiju appeared on the horizon, drawn by the light and the thunderous sounds of its kin's movements. But even as hope swelled among the townsfolk, a new threat emerged. The alien ships, now aware of the beacon, began to converge on the hilltop. Eva's radio crackled to life with a warning from the lookout stationed along the coast. "We've got incoming. They're headed straight for you." Eva's face hardened. "We need to hold them off. If we lose the beacon now, we might lose our chance." A small band of volunteers armed themselves with whatever they could find, forming a protective ring around the beacon. They knew they couldn't hold off a full attack, but they were determined to buy Jade and Owen the time they needed to complete the communication attempt. As the alien ships closed in, the kaiju began to move. The larger of the two let out a bellow that shook the heavens, and then it charged towards the alien vessels. The second kaiju followed, its massive tail sweeping through the air as it barreled towards the hilltop, placing itself between the beacon and the alien threat. Eva watched in awe as the kaiju, seemingly understanding the peril, threw themselves into the fight. The message had been received, if not fully understood, and the creatures were responding to the humans' call for help. Amidst the chaos, Jade continued her work, her fingers flying over the controls as she adjusted the sequences, hoping to solidify the bond between the humans and their newfound allies. They had made contact, and now they needed to build a bridge. The townspeople looked on, a mixture of hope and fear etched on their faces. They were witnessing the first steps of an unlikely alliance, one that would test the limits of their courage and resolve. But as they stood on that battered hilltop, with alien ships bearing down and towering kaiju fighting back, they knew they had found a glimmer of hope in the unlikeliest of places. The battle between the kaiju and the alien ships raged across the town's landscape. From the hilltop, Ava, Jade, Dr. Foster, and the other townspeople watched as the kaiju repelled the alien forces with a fury they hadn't anticipated. But they knew this was only the beginning. True cooperation would require a deeper connection. After hours of relentless fighting, the alien ships retreated, leaving the kaiju standing guard over the battered town. The people cheered, but they also knew that this was just a temporary victory. They had to solidify their bond with the kaiju if they were to survive the ongoing invasion. With the alien threat temporarily at bay, the group returned to their shelter, where they could regroup and refine their communication efforts. Dr. Foster, realizing they needed more than light pulses, began brainstorming ways to establish a deeper mental connection with the kaiju. "We need to connect emotionally and mentally," Dr. Foster said, pacing as he spoke. "The kaiju have shown they're receptive, but light signals alone won't be enough. We need a way to engage with them on a deeper level, to convey our intent, our emotions." Jade was deep in thought, scribbling ideas onto her notepad. "What if we try something akin to empathy projection? We might not understand their language, but emotions are universal. If we can find a way to project our feelings, they might respond." Eva nodded. "I like where this is going. We need to show them that we're allies, that we're here to fight alongside them, not against them. But how do we amplify emotion?" Dr. Foster's eyes lit up as an idea struck him. "The human brain emits electrical impulses. Our thoughts and emotions can be measured. If we can amplify these impulses, we might be able to project them beyond ourselves. It would be risky, but perhaps we can adapt some of the alien technology we've recovered to transmit emotional signals." Ava was skeptical, but intrigued. "So, you're saying we should create some kind of emotional broadcast?" "Exactly," Dr. Foster replied. "It's a long shot, but it might just work. We'll need volunteers, people who can channel positive emotions like hope and courage. If we can project those feelings, maybe the kaiju will sense our intentions and feel the same." Jade stepped forward immediately. "Count me in. I've seen the kaiju up close. I know they're more than just beasts. If there's a chance we can reach them, I'll do whatever it takes." As Dr. Foster and Jade worked on modifying the alien tech, word spread through the town, and a handful of volunteers came forward to participate. Among them was Owen, the engineer who had built the beacon, and Maria, a retired teacher who had always had a calming presence. The team rigged up the makeshift empathy transmitter, incorporating alien components that seemed to amplify brainwave patterns. It was a crude setup, but they had no other options. Once everything was in place, They led the volunteers to a quiet area near the Kaiju's resting grounds. The creatures had settled in the ruins, their massive forms lying motionless but alert, as if waiting. Dr. Foster explained the plan to the volunteers. I need each of you to focus on a specific feeling. Hope, courage, love, peace. We're going to channel those emotions through the transmitter and see if the Kaiju respond. It might be disorienting, but remember, this is our chance to forge a real connection. Eva joined the group, her face set with determination. She reached out to place a reassuring hand on Jade's shoulder. This is the moment. Let's give it everything we've got. The volunteers gathered in a circle, each placing a hand on the transmitter. Dr. Foster activated the device, and a low hum filled the air as it began to amplify their brainwaves. The volunteers closed their eyes, focusing on their emotions as instructed. A feeling of warmth washed over them, mingling their individual thoughts and emotions into a unified pulse. The Kaiju stirred, their eyes reflecting the glow of the device. Jade felt a strange sensation, as if her own emotions were being magnified and echoed back at her. She opened her eyes and saw the Kaiju's massive gaze fixed upon them, its eyes softening, almost reflecting understanding. Suddenly, one of the Kaiju let out a low, resonant sound, like a deep hum that reverberated through their bones. The second Kaiju responded, echoing the sound with a series of rhythmic growls. The two creatures stood and moved towards the group, lowering their heads as if to listen more closely. They're responding, Jade whispered, her heart racing. They can feel us. Ava's eyes filled with hope. Let's see if they'll follow us. With the empathy transmitter still humming, Eva and Jade led the group slowly away from the ruins. The Kaiju followed, their massive forms moving with surprising gentleness. It was as if they were drawn to the emotions radiating from the transmitter, curious and compelled by the strange new sensations. The townspeople who had been watching from a distance looked on in awe, unable to believe what they were seeing. The Kaiju, once feared as unstoppable monsters, were now walking alongside their human allies, guided not by force, but by an emotional connection that transcended language and species. As they led the Kaiju towards the coast, Eva realized the power they now held. The Kaiju were no longer just creatures of destruction. They were allies, connected through trust and understanding. But they had to protect this fragile bond if they were to survive the alien threat that still loomed. The townsfolk, moved by the sight of the Kaiju marching alongside the humans, began to cheer, their voices filled with renewed hope. They had not only reached the Kaiju, they had forged a connection that could be the key to their survival. Yet Eva knew that this alliance was still in its infancy, and the true test was yet to come. The alien forces would return, stronger and more determined than ever. But now, with the Kaiju by their side, they had a fighting chance. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the town, Eva turned to the volunteers, her eyes bright with determination. We've taken the first step. Now we need to prepare for what comes next. We've shown that we can connect with the Kaiju, but now we have to stand together. And as they gazed out over the horizon, with the Kaiju standing sentinel at their side, they knew they were ready to face whatever the future held, united in their resolve. The following morning, Ava, Jade, Dr. Foster, and the rest of the townspeople awoke to a tense silence. The alien forces had regrouped and were now advancing with a larger fleet, determined to quash any resistance. The air was thick with anticipation, and Ava could feel the weight of the coming battle settling over the town. The empathy transmitter had worked beyond their expectations, allowing them to form a fragile connection with the Kaiju. But now, they faced a new challenge. Could this bond hold strong under the strain of an all-out war? As the alien ships appeared on the horizon, the Kaiju sensed the threat, their massive forms rising to their full heights. Eva noticed a subtle shift in their demeanor. The creatures were no longer just responding to the transmitter. They were actively guarding the humans. The sight filled her with a mixture of awe and fear. Eva gathered the townspeople for a final briefing. This is it. We know what we're up against, and we have to work together. The Kaiju are with us, but they can't do it alone. We need to support them in any way we can. Jade nodded, determination shining in her eyes. We can't let fear break our bond with them. We've come this far. We have to trust them, and they have to trust us. The townsfolk, though frightened, rallied together. They were a diverse group. Farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, and laborers, all united by a common cause. As they prepared for the battle, they shared a moment of silence, each person drawing strength from those around them. Dr. Foster and Jade checked the transmitter one last time, making sure it was functioning properly. "We've amplified the range," Dr. Foster explained, "so that we can project our emotions across the entire battlefield. It's risky, but it's our best shot at maintaining the connection with the Kaiju." Eva took a deep breath, glancing up at the towering creatures. "Let's do this." With the alien fleet advancing, Eva, Jade, and the others activated the transmitter, flooding the area with feelings of solidarity, courage, and hope. The Kaiju let out deep, resonant sounds, their eyes glowing with renewed intensity. It was as if they were absorbing the emotions, using them to fuel their strength. The alien ships opened fire, beams of light cutting through the sky. The Kaiju moved swiftly, their massive bodies deflecting the attacks with a combination of brute force and agility. They roared, their voices echoing across the landscape, a powerful signal to the alien forces that humanity was not alone. The townspeople took cover, but they continued to channel their emotions through the transmitter, focusing on the bond they had created with the Kaiju. Jade, crouched beside Eva, whispered, "They're holding the line. We can't let up now." Suddenly, a group of alien soldiers landed on the outskirts of the town, moving in with mechanical precision. Eva realized that while the Kaiju were occupied with the fleet, the ground forces were trying to flank them. She looked around, spotting the makeshift weapons they had assembled, and signaled to the others. "We need to hold them back," Eva shouted, rallying the townspeople. "The Kaiju are counting on us to protect their flanks. This is our fight too." The townspeople took up their weapons, a mixture of alien tech and improvised arms, and faced the incoming soldiers. Jade and Dr. Foster joined them, their faces set with resolve. As they engaged the alien soldiers, they were overwhelmed by the sense of unity that bound them together. They fought not just for themselves, but for the Kaiju and for the future of their world. The battle raged on, with the Kaiju and humans working together in a coordinated effort. Eva and her group pushed back the alien soldiers, holding the line as the Kaiju took on the fleet. She caught sight of one of the Kaiju towering over them, its massive form shielding them from incoming fire. It was a surreal moment. A creature that had once been a symbol of fear now stood as their protector. As the ground battle intensified, Eva noticed one of the Kaiju beginning to falter. It had taken several direct hits, and its movements were becoming sluggish. She felt a surge of desperation, knowing they couldn't afford to lose their connection with the creatures now. "We have to help them!" she cried out, focusing all her energy on the transmitter. She poured every ounce of hope and resilience she had into the device, willing the Kaiju to feel her determination. Jade joined her, clutching the transmitter tightly. "Come on," she whispered. "You can do this. We're here with you." The Kaiju seemed to respond, straightening its stance and letting out a fierce roar. It charged forward, its massive form crashing into the alien ships with renewed vigor. The sight filled Eva with a sense of awe, as she realized the full power of the bond they had created. Despite the intense combat, a sense of calm washed over Eva as she watched the Kaiju fighting alongside them. They were no longer just monsters. They were allies, connected by a shared will to survive. She could see it in their movements, in the way they shielded the humans and attacked with purpose. It was a beautiful, terrifying, and exhilarating sight all at once. The battle stretched on, each side pushing to their limits. The humans and Kaiju fought as one, their combined strength and determination proving to be a formidable force. The aliens, though powerful, seemed taken aback by the resilience of their opponents. Eva could sense a shift in the tide, as the Kaiju continued to fend off the alien ships with a ferocity that left no room for doubt. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the alien fleet began to retreat. The remaining ships pulled back, disappearing into the sky as the Kaiju roared their victory. The townspeople cheered, their voices rising in unison as they embraced each other, overcome with relief and joy. Eva turned to Jade, a smile breaking across her face. We did it. We actually did it. Jade laughed, wiping away tears. I can't believe it. They trusted us, and we trusted them. It's incredible. As the dust settled, the kaiju stood over the town, their massive forms casting long shadows as the sun began to set. They were battered, but victorious. The bond they had forged with the humans had held strong, proving that trust and cooperation could overcome even the most insurmountable odds. Eva knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But for now, they had won a victory that no one could ever take away. They had bridged the gap between humans and kaiju, forging a partnership that would stand as a testament to the power of unity. As she looked around at the people and creatures who had fought beside her, Eva felt a profound sense of hope. Together, they had faced the impossible, and they had prevailed. As the sun rose over the battered town, Eva, Jade, and Dr. Foster stood amidst the rubble, taking in the quiet aftermath of the battle. The alien ships had retreated, leaving behind a world forever changed. Around them, townspeople and kaiju alike moved carefully among the ruins, picking up the pieces of what was left and beginning to rebuild. Eva looked up at the kaiju that had fought alongside them. The creatures seemed calm now, their enormous forms casting shadows over the landscape as they rested, standing sentinel over the town they had defended. It was a surreal sight. Beings that had once been the source of nightmares now stood as protectors. Dr. Foster joined Eva, his face a mix of exhaustion and relief. We've just witnessed the impossible, he said, his voice filled with wonder. Not only did we survive, but we built a bridge between worlds. We found a way to understand each other. Eva nodded, her gaze still fixed on the kaiju. They trusted us. We didn't just survive because of our technology or strength. We survived because we found a way to connect, to make them our allies. It feels like we've crossed some invisible threshold, doesn't it? Jade approached, her expression filled with awe. Do you think it'll last, this bond between us and the kaiju? Eva took a deep breath, letting the question linger. I hope so. We've shown them that we're not just creatures of fear and destruction. I think they understand that we're capable of more. Maybe, just maybe, they'll see us as something worth protecting, just as we've learned to see them. The three of them shared a moment of silence, watching as the kaiju began to move. One of the creatures let out a low rumble, as if communicating with the others. The ground shook as they started to retreat, heading towards the wilderness beyond the town. But before they disappeared from view, one of the kaiju paused, turning to look back at the humans. It locked eyes with Eva, and in that moment, she felt an inexplicable connection, a silent understanding that transcended words. She raised a hand in farewell, and the creature dipped its massive head as if acknowledging her gesture. Then, with a final rumble, it turned and followed the others into the wild. Dr. Foster smiled, watching the creatures disappear into the distance. They'll be back. I can feel it. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of something much bigger than any of us. The townspeople slowly gathered around Eva, Jade, and Dr. Foster, their faces filled with a mix of emotions. There was relief, certainly, but also a sense of pride. They had stood together, humans and kaiju, and they had won. They had proven that unity was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. One of the elders stepped forward, her eyes misty with gratitude. You've given us hope, Eva. We were ready to fight, but you found a way to make peace. Thank you for showing us that there's more to life than just survival. Eva accepted the thanks with a humble nod, knowing that it hadn't been her alone. It had taken all of them, their shared determination, their willingness to look beyond fear and see the potential for understanding. She glanced at Jade, who gave her a knowing smile, and at Dr. Foster, who simply nodded, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. The townspeople began to talk about rebuilding, about what they had learned, and how they could prepare for the future. They knew that the aliens might return, that there could be more battles ahead, but they also knew that they were no longer alone. They had allies, friends even, in the kaiju. and that was a strength that no alien force could take from them. As the days passed, the bond with the Kaiju became a part of their new normal. The townspeople adapted, finding ways to integrate the creatures into their lives, to understand their patterns and needs. They developed new technologies, combining human ingenuity with what they had learned from the Kaiju, creating a fusion of cultures that had once seemed impossible. The story of their partnership spread, reaching other towns and cities, inspiring a movement that swept across the world. People began to see the Kaiju not as threats, but as beings with their own minds, their own potential for understanding and cooperation. The fear that had once divided them gave way to curiosity, to respect, and finally, to friendship. Years later, Eva stood on the outskirts of the town, watching as a new generation of humans and Kaiju played together, their laughter echoing across the landscape. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had built something that would endure beyond her lifetime. Jade joined her, her eyes shining with pride. "We did it, Eva. We actually did it. We changed the world." Eva smiled, her heart filled with gratitude for the journey they had taken. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And I think, in the end, that's what matters most. Together they watched as humans and Kaiju coexisted, not in fear, but in harmony. A testament to the power of trust, of hope, and of a bond that had transcended the boundaries of species and fear. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, united in their shared determination to survive and thrive together. And as the sun set on the horizon, Eva knew that they had forged a legacy that would endure, a beacon of light in a world that had once seemed so dark. For they had shown that even the most formidable barriers could be overcome, not by force, but by understanding, by courage, and by the beauty of an indomitable human spirit.